Hello, fellow builders, and welcome back to the Bench. Mediocre Modeler here again with you, and we're less than a week till Christmas, and I'm kind of in an impasse because the 3D printer's in the middle of finishing up a print, so I can't quite do what I want to do. But I've been having problems with the 3D printer, and that made me think that I really should talk to you about the 3D printer and what things you might want to think about going into getting a 3D printer before you make the deep dive. So let's get started doing that. The reason I started 3D printing is I already have pretty much all the other production models, at least all the ones that I want, as far as the Bondi kits and the NPCs and all that. And I'm not a fan of the. I would rather build a thing that's a representative of a thing as opposed to buying a statue or a toy of that thing. If that makes sense. Well, made sense to me. Knowing what you're going to print is going to go a long way in helping you decide whether you even really need to own your own 3D printer, or can you just live with buying, subscribing to or obtaining an already printed piece from someone. Because a lot like Pinshape, I think Pinshape and Thingiverse have a way to where you can pick the product and then have it printed for you. Now, my Battlestar Galactica helmet, that was my first foray into 3D printing, and it showed up as a box of pieces, which, it was a model kit, so I didn't mind. But it costs $200-300 to do that. So that's when I started making the decision, if I'm gonna continue to go down this road, then maybe I should invest in a 3D printer. Are you printing major things that are going to be their own thing, or are you printing side things, adjacent things? So that's the first thing I think you need to. What is it going to do for you, your hobby, your model building? Because I'd hate for you to spend the money, think it's going to be this great thing, and it just sits in the corner being unused. So that's number one. The second thing you want to consider is location. Now, I happen to have a corner that I could put mine in. I had some stuff on display there, but it worked better for the 3D printer to be out of the way. Now, you could certainly put it in your garage or something like that, but it works better, which is why I have the enclosure on there, to help retain the heat in there. Now, the enclosure is one that I made from just scrap material that I had around in the garage, including the light. The second part of the reason why it's in an enclosure is because I have cats, and cats love to mess with moving things like that. My cats would be all over that print head, and I just don't want to think about what I might do to that cat because he jumped up and either messed up the printer or, well, okay, so the cat might get hurt too. And that's not going to be a cheap prospect either. But it's in the enclosure, they can't get to it, kids' hands can't get to it, it retains the heat, everybody's happy. So that's number two. Third, let's talk about the cost. Don't forget about time. That costs you too. Yes, and time. You've done your research. There's plenty of files out there that you really want to print. You have a place to put it, and you've already taken into consideration the initial cost of the printer. We're not talking about those costs. We're talking about the cost beyond that. Mainly filament. Now, I get my filament from the Micro Center, and I typically print only in gray because with most model kits, the plastic comes usually in gray or black. I'm going to paint it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if you're planning on being very artistic and creative and you want to use multiple colors on anything, every time you want to change colors, it's going to cost you another 20 bucks. So if you do a rainbow colored thing, follow your Roy G. Biv, there's 7 colors, there's $140 right there. So that's the cost aspect, okay, in money. Let's talk about the cost aspect in time. The Mandalorian helmet took 100 hours to print. I'm printing some bridge supports now for a Thomas the Tank Engine for my grandson. Those, just 2 bridge supports is 10 hours. If you only have the one printer, your time is being tied up in the print time. So unless you've got something to keep you busy in the meantime, you're dead in the water. So, not to mention the fact that I'm lucky enough to have a micro center where I get all my filament not that far away. So you also have to take that into consideration. If you're nowhere near someplace where you can just pop in and grab filament and look at the colors or whatever, that is going to cost you time, because if you're in the middle of a print and you run out and you're not close, you're going to have to wait for your next roll to come in. So that could be the next day, it could be a couple of days, just depends on what you're doing. So keep that in mind, the cost in money and time. Sooner or later, you're going to have to work on your printer because something's going to be wrong with it. I equate that to light maintenance on your car. If you can change your oil or figure out the difference between whether it's your battery or your alternator, you should be fine. Not to mention the fact that you're going to want to upgrade. Upgrading like adding a direct drive extruder or changing the location of your print spooler. All those things are very light and fairly easy to do. So if you can turn a wrench, even a small one, you'll be okay. And this brings us to number 5, finishing your print. Now, keep in mind, it's not a Star Trek replicator. It's a 3D printer. And if you're printing small stuff like headphone hangers or business card holders, stuff that you can just print off, pop off there, off the print bed and sit on your desk or wherever it needs to go, bolt it to the wall. And if that's what you're doing, great, have that. But if you're trying to get a finished model, it's going to require a little bit of work. You're going to have to dust off some of those modeling skills. You're going to have to do some sanding and some bondoing, because you're going to have prints that don't come out quite right. And if you want it to have that ultra fine finished look, you're going to have to put the work in. But if you, at this point, if you can cross off, if you can check all those criteria, then congratulations. You're a good candidate for a 3D printer. Now that I've gotten this, my printer seems to be running back again at 100%, and I've got a game plan on how I'm going to fix this, it's time to get back to it. Well, I hope this has helped somebody decide whether you're in the category for getting a printer or not. And if you're not, there's no shame in that. You can always, like I said, have the thing printed and sent to you and you can enjoy it. Or maybe you might have a buddy who's got a 3D printer that you can call up and say, hey, I've got a file that I need you to print. It's only going to take 100 hours. Be kind, offer to buy the filament. But in any case, this has been fun for me. Thank you for indulging me in this. But it's time to get back to getting some work done. I've got some repair work to do on this guy. This was interesting because luckily this one stopped at 98%, and then I tried to reprint it upside. I printed this one right side up and it stopped at 98%. I tried to print it upside down and this is stopped at 2%. Happy accident. Okay. Anyway, I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. It's time to get something built. So let's go build something. Have fun, be safe, and see you next time. Pew 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 pew.